Coming up on this week's Sports Stump, the Utah Mammoth catch up in my playoff pacing, then me immediately give it up. But I'll tell you why I'm still hopeful. If you can believe it or not, I have some Jazz news to talk about. What is the Pac 12 doing with their conference football schedule? And last, my Super Bowl pick. You're listening to Indestructible's Sports Channel. Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. The Utah Mammoth are currently in a 2-0 lead against the Detroit Red Wings with about 5 minutes left to play. We're hoping that they will continue that. The Mammoth also completely dominated the last place Vancouver Canucks 6-2 at the Delta Center on Monday night. This is exactly what they needed to do after dropping two close games and falling briefly out of the wild card spot. For those of you wanting a recap since last Tuesday, the Mammoth got back on track towards my playoff pacing line when they surprisingly beat Florida in Sunrise. You could already call the road trip a success, but things did take a sour turn when they were up on the Carolina Hurricanes 4-2 with just 2 minutes left. Barrett Hayton inexplicably took a 4-minute double minor high stick penalty. The Hurricanes capitalized on that and scored once during that power play. Then they scored on a 6-5 empty net situation to tie the game. And then at even strength, they scored again with about 35 seconds left to win 5-4 in regulation. There's no way to put it. The Mammoth choked that game away, and although in the grand picture the loss isn't backbreaking, it can become a backbreaking loss if the loss continues to haunt them over the course of the next few games. It looked like on Saturday that they were having a little bit of a hangover effect. I was actually able to go to that Saturday game against Dallas, and it started out with the same boneheaded penalties. The Dallas Stars capitalized on that and took a quick 3-1 lead into the first period, scoring twice on power play goals. The Mammoth were able to climb back in, make it interesting, scoring a goal in the third period, but they just couldn't quite get what they needed to force overtime, and they ended up losing that second game there at home. That one game then was a game that they needed to win as far as my projections are concerned. And so that's what dipped them back below 2 points again below my pacing line. With only 2 games left before the Olympic break, it's become a must win situation to close out with 4 points. The Mammoth succeeded in the first half of that quest. The Canucks are no world beaters this year, but the Mammoth came out with purpose. They withstood every push the Canucks tried to make, and Nick Schmaltz ended with 4 points and his third career hat trick. I was also impressed with how energized the crowd was. They were definitely in it, and I could feel that through the TV. Like I mentioned, the Mammoth are currently lockstep in a battle. Now we're at about a minute left in the second period, scoreless period for both teams, and hopefully they can hold on there to wrap up the pre-Olympic break with those 4 necessary points. Moving out of the NHL and into the NBA, I am in no way an insider or huge follower of the Utah Jazz. At least currently right now. I will be the first to admit I've disengaged once they traded away Rudy and Donovan and have tried to tank. One can always understand the strategy, but I must concede that I have a hard time staying as a true fan of a franchise that's actively trying to lose. But that seems like that is about to change as the Jazz have made a trade now that signifies that they are looking to win sooner rather than later. I'll list here the official details of the trade, but needless to say, the Jazz are essentially trading 3 first-round draft picks and some young, raw talent for All-Star Jaren Jackson Jr. from the Grizzlies, as well as a couple of other players. From what I can tell, this really helps solidify the front court with Markkanen and Kessler once he returns next year. I'm assuming they will try to re-sign Kessler now, and this will make for a big front court lineup. Then what's left is you move Ace back up to the 2 and then keep Keontae at the 1, obviously. Someone more in the know will have to tell me whether this is a huge win for the Jazz, and maybe it still remains to be seen. From what I've read, it seems like Jaren Jackson's sort of a hit and miss in struggles with maybe some consistency, but who else doesn't on the Jazz at this point in time? I don't know Jaren's game all that much, other than that he is a great defensive presence. What it does tell me is, as a casual fan, is that they're no longer trying to sit on those assets. They're trying to now make some moves and use those assets to help them get a little bit better rather than always just drafting these young talent. And who knows if they continue to struggle this year, as it seems like they will. And who knows, they could end up winning the lottery even without the worst pick. We've already known that getting the worst pick or having the best odds does not necessarily guarantee anything for you. I'm not going to hold my breath. The Jazz have never been able to move up in the draft in the lottery, so I won't hold my breath. But if they somehow can sneak into a top 3 pick, combined with all the moves that they're making, then look out. At the time that I wrote this script, they also hadn't announced this other trade that the Jazz had made. But as of today, I'll just kind of free ad hoc what had happened. Essentially, the Jazz acquired a couple more players from the Bulls, from the or sorry, not from the Bulls, from the Cleveland Cavaliers. They acquired Lonzo Ball, who they eventually then turned around and released. Looks like Cleveland was trying to get rid of some cap space. Utah was willing to do that. They also then, I can't even remember, I'll put it here up above who they actually also traded. They ended up turning around and trading that player over to Charlotte. And essentially, when all is said and done, the Jazz essentially flipped everything for 2 second-round draft picks. So nothing really, you know, completely game breaking there, but the Jazz are making some moves and they're trying to make an impact. And who knows, maybe they're going to try and make a push next season to at least start being competitive. Next up, moving from the NBA, we're going to talk college football and specifically the Pac-12 conference. The Pac-12 seems like it wants to take the Pac-12 after dark mantra and apply it to its football scheduling. The conference still has not released its schedule for the reason of trying to wait and see how the CFP changes and the rules are finally solidified. One idea that's been floated around that I slightly alluded to in my last video has me wanting to talk about it now here in this video. With only 8 football members in the conference, that leaves a 7 game conference round robin schedule, which sort of puts a strain on the non conference scheduling as well as how serious the other conferences will perceive the Pac 12. You've sort of seen this general push towards conferences wanting to play more conference games. Somehow, I guess what that means is that they're beefing up their schedule. Maybe for the power conferences because that guarantees another power conference team game instead of playing a group of 5 or 6. I don't know how it necessarily bulks up the group of 6 conferences by playing more conference games, but I digress. Um, but I don't know how seriously this idea has been taken by the Pac 12 leadership and the athletic directors. But one idea that has been floated around is rather than having like an 8th game as a protected, like home and home rivalry game, there's this idea of having what we would call a flex game. You've seen it in the NFL where they flex games to Sunday night football instead of just during the day, depending on where we're at in the season as well as the type of matchups to try and get the best matchups. In here they're going to apply a similar thing with a Pac-12 game. Not they are, but that has been an idea that's floated around. So after the 7 conference games are scheduled, you should have a true 1 through 7, because you have some easy to count head-to-head tiebreakers and things like that. And then for that 8th game, what you do is you actually flex it. And the idea that's being floated around is that maybe even have almost like a pre-playoff game. So the top 4 seeds in the Pac-12 conference after those 7 games are played, the number 1 seed would play the 4 seed at home, the number 2 seed would play the 3 seed, and the winner of those 2 games would actually meet in the conference championship game. And not only would the top 4 seeds have that extra game, but you would actually flex the teams 5 through 8. So it could be determined based on matchups or rankings or some other factors, but they would also have, a second game versus one of the other opponents. I actually love this idea because it gives the Pac 12 leaders more opportunities to play tougher opponents. Whoever is going to end up coming out of the Pac 12 will have played a couple of one more tough game within their conference to help boost their resume. And it keeps things interesting in the conference even longer. I'd even like to see other conferences do this as well, but I think that's just called divisions. But if other conferences don't go to divisions, they could use something like this, and that would help be a better option of solving all of this tiebreaker dilemma that you're currently seeing. Picture this. Let's use the SEC for example. The week before the conference championship game now becomes a flex week. The top 4 teams play each other the same way that I described in the Pac 12 scenario. But also get this, you could also even have seeds 5 through 8 play each other. The winner of those games could play the losers of the 1 through 4 games during the conference championship weekend as sort of a losers bracket. You would still end up with 2 winners in that losers bracket, but that would at least have more on the fence teams being able to play their way and boost up their resumes as you get closer to the playoffs. Like imagine if Texas and Vanderbilt were able to first play each other and then maybe play the loser of Alabama or the Ole Miss or one of the other teams that missed out on the conference championship but was still elevated higher in the SEC standings. You might be able to get a Texas sneaking back into the playoffs more so than Oklahoma. I know this isn't as flushed out as I'd like it to be, but you get my drift. We'll just have to see what the Pac 12 decides, but anything to shake it up and get me interested, I'm in for. Okay, and we are finally ready for the Super Bowl this Sunday, and I think it's the 2 teams other than the Eagles that I least wanted to see if you watched my who I'm rooting for tier list. But so that means that I had to enter in like some betting pools in order to keep me interested in watching this game. I mean, I'll always watch the Super Bowl, but to really have like a cheering stake in this game, it's more based on some of these bets that I have going on. Both defenses are great. Both quarterbacks are unproven. That's really the most in depth analysis that I'm going to give on this game. That's not really my style, but anything I feel like could really happen in this game. I actually think that Seattle's familiarity with playing in San Francisco could actually give them an advantage here. Seattle right now is favored by 4.5 points, and I'm actually going to pick Seattle to win and also cover. Let's just say, I'll say 24-14 Seattle. All right, and that was just a rapid fire of just some of these past week events and my thoughts. Next week, we'll take the results of the Super Bowl and plug it into my NFL lifetime power rankings and give you a new set of power rankings 1 to 32. We'll do a quick recap of each team's season and whether they're trending up and down. These are usually my favorite videos to make, so we have that to look forward to. So until next time, guys, take care.